we have to dig in and recognize that things are changing fast, and it may not be as easy as it has been for the last 250 years. And so when I look at climate change and some of the things that are happening, you know, why would we fight and resist a mine that's supposed to bring all of this money and all of these jobs to our area, up in Bad River as an example? Well, those metallic mineral bodies are part of the fire, the original fire that fought its way through billions and billions of years ago in our areas. When you look on top of Keynote Mountains, the Tyler Forks River that starts there, you know, rushing groundwater from deep under the earth. The Tyler Forks River is covered in black lava. The groundwater that's rushing up rushes through the metallic mineral body that's there underneath the rock, and it's connected to the old volcanic fiery pathways that existed when this place was built. This place meaning the Great Lakes region. And so one of the things that happens is that there's no coincidence that wherever they want to mine for metallic mineral, they have to encounter an unbelievable amount of groundwater pumping up out of the earth. Beautiful, clean, cold groundwater pumping out of the earth. And that water comes from way deep. I always used to say it comes from that place where there's you could say a sauna or sweat. Hot rocks and deep earth and water are coming into contact. It's creating steam. Steam's creating pressure. That pressure is pushing deep underground water up. Water does what water does, jumps in the path of least resistance. It's those volcanic pathways to the surface of the planet. As it runs and rushes to the surface of the earth, there's that remnant fire. There's that remnant fire. Just like I said, you know, Excalibur, right? That movie where they're making Excalibur, the sword and forge, and it's just this orange molten lava as they're pounding on that sword. But they take that orange glowing piece of metal that's kind of almost liquidy, and they cool it really quick. When those old fires from the center of the earth, you'd say, came into contact with water at the surface, they cooled very quickly. And as that fire retreated, that fire got cooled and trapped. And that's that metallic mineral body. On a planetary scale in the Keynote area, we're talking probably 25 billion tons of it. And so that water rushes up through there. And of course, science, I think a few years ago, talked about the miraculous discovery of how copper, as an example, cleans and purifies and removes bacteria. Again, in our home, on a planetary level, we have quadrillions of tons of groundwater pumping up all around us, running through metallic mineral bodies that is cleansing it before it jumps on the surface with us. That type of thing is a really decent insurance policy that will help get us through whatever climate calamity is on the way. The other thing about these places, and in the context of what we're talking about when we stand up and resist and fight for our homes and water, is that when those giant rocks hold that metallic, in the Pinocchios, those giant rocks hold that metallic mineral body up in the air. And I know it sounds funny because modern society's got us trained to think about mining as somewhere way deep in the earth. Let me show you. If this is Lake Superior, and this is the Bad River Res, and this is the top of the Pinocchio Mountains, and it goes over here and quickly drops, and then we head to southern Wisconsin, like Phillips and Flambeau. If these are the Pinocchios right here, and that metallic mineral body is captured right here, southern Wisconsin to Lake Superior, it's actually like that. When you got a 1,000-foot high mountain, and you're only going to go down 1,000 feet, they're actually not really getting way down into the earth. Those rocks hold that metallic mineral body up in the air. And it's a beautiful thing because, number one, we've got groundwater from the earth to help us get through any climate calamity that's coming. But then you got 20 billion tons. You can look through the Porcupine Mountains up into the UP, the Menominee River. We could talk about how many trillions of tons of metallic mineral in the air around the Great Lakes. It's an important thing to have when those thunderbirds come from the west and they're rumbling through, low in the sky, as in a huge ball of electromagnetic energy. And you've got trillions of tons of metal held by giant rocks up in the air. They call that stuff in. They call that stuff in conductivity. And so you're almost guaranteed rain. And how does it work? Well, like up in the Pinocchio's and Back River watershed system, we can sit right here on this side of the Pinocchio's in about 8 inches of snow. And then you got the Pinocchio's and all that mineral calling that stuff in. And right over here, Manitowish Waters will be in 48 inches of snow. And of course, it's supposed to be because of elevation. It's supposed to be because of lake effect. But our stories go back to when Mushkazee, Bad River, was always the home of Anakibineshua, those thunderbirds. My point being on that is that we get beautiful rainfall. And those metallic mineral bodies and the way this place is structured by the Creator helps with that. So you got groundwater bubbling up out of the earth, you got rain coming from the sky, and you got an extinction event like Fukushima and calamity coming. When the window of life is this wide, everything's going good, and all the species are flowing through it, times are good. And in fact, times are pretty good. We've been in a planetary epoch of peace, right? But when things get tough, and the climate changes, maybe little mini ice ages come, maybe other type of volcanic activity comes, you could think of water at 8 pounds per gallon on a planetary scale, having the poles melt, Antarctica melt at 8 pounds per gallon, redistributing on a tectonic plate system that they liken to the red skin of an apple that's been in a very relatively peaceful push-pull balancing act. That's that old balance between fire and water. But when you redistribute 2 parts of the earth at 8 pounds per gallon, those tectonic plates are going to get moved around a little bit. When things change and economies collapse, there's things that we know go through. That window of life that's just rushing everything through and times are good starts to close. And pretty soon, it might even get to be a pinhole. When that's a pinhole, we can look to things like Neme, the sturgeon. The sturgeon goes through. The sturgeon goes through that pinhole. And we know that because the sturgeon knew the dinosaurs, right? They swam in the water while the dinosaurs rolled. They probably spawned in the shadows of old megaflora and megafauna. And yet they're still with us. They made it through. Wild rice, when that's a pinhole and all life is trying to get through, wild rice makes it through. The longest recorded dormancy of a wild rice seed has been 99 years. The story, as I heard it, goes that there was an inland lake that hadn't experienced any wild rice, and all of a sudden, one summer, boom, it blew up with wild rice. That's a gift from the Creator. And that dormancy, that ability of that seed to ride the bog while calamity may roll is unbelievable. Anishinaabe understands that Neme, with that ancient memory of all those water pathways, they say Neme knows all those water pathways that are on the surface, and they know all of those connections that are underneath too, from those aquifers and all that stuff. But Anishinaabe understand that Neme goes through, and the water that flows over black lava rocks, that stuff is also going to go through. It's been here for billions of years. And so you got wild rice, sturgeon, you got water gushing up. You know, in the last ice age, the water that was running from artesian sources actually served as a geothermal component. Those faucets don't shut off. If you experience thaw, those faucets don't shut off, so you always got water to drink, but more importantly, you got oxygenation, I can't even say the word. You have air for your water resources. I always think of that boulder that's in the aquarium in the Walmart aquariums, all their keeps all the fish alive. That's the kind of power that places have. Well, Nishinaabe goes through too. And that's the power of our home, that's the power of these places, and that's context that is rooted in natural law and life and death. And again, the moment in time is this big. If we can protect this place while these guys are losing their minds, things like Fukushima, things like the pipeline spills, things like Flint and their lead in the water, Milwaukee with their lead in the water, things like drinkable water are going to start to rise because people ain't going to be able to continue to deny the fact that Mother Earth is hurting. So until then, it's people who are conscious and understand that and have that long memory and way of seeing that are going to have to stand up and resist what's going on nowadays. So, a couple of notes that I made to try and remember was to just make note of what's going on around us in the context changing on the regulatory level. So we have a new president. I can't say the word president and what comes after it in the same sentence. We have a new president. And the types of things that he's pushing are an unbelievable course that's rooted in ignorance. And again, if you're pushing for pipelines, if you're pushing for oil, if you're pushing for mining that are going to destroy aquifers, that are going to destroy landscapes and river systems, and the context is climate change, and the fact that we know things are going to get pretty rough, it's not going to look very wise to engage in that stuff. So what do we see? And I'm sure everybody's well aware of it. We see the president and the current Congress essentially trying to obliterate any notion or mention of climate change. It's as though we can hit the delete button on a computer, we can take an eraser and erase the ink on paper, as though we can wave a magic wand and change the sky and change the fact that there's climactic and epic droughts going on, change the fact that the 25 million year old Great Barrier Reef has been declared dead. It's though magic wand, we can just forget about all of that stuff and say, hey, this is going to be great. We're going to create a lot of jobs, and this is our path into the future. Well, that context of what's going on right now is a very, very dangerous thing. And what's really frightening is that the beautiful resistance we see in Standing Rock on the pipeline resistance is and that's made a ripple effect across the country, is being addressed by the current Congress legislatively as they start to amp up the seriousness of charges and things like that, as they outlaw the ability to wear a face mask, right, in group setting, things like that. They're amping up their attacks on people that want to try and protect places, people that want to try and protect the water, people that want to protect the home and the future and sanctity of their children's health. So it's all kind of coming to a bit of a head, and that conflict is something that's going to be something that continues to grow. And I know our elders talk about how we're at that time of the quickening. I often get a kick out of it because I think Trump and Bannon and all of those guys are getting the same message. Trump's main advisor, Bannon, the alt-right person there, talks in his speeches about the great turning. So I got elders telling me about the quickening that we're in this moment in time, and I hear Bannon talking to the alt-right folks about the great turning that's going on in America right now. And I think he's kind of right, except that he's thinking about race and money, and we're thinking about ecosystems, life into perpetuity. And so that's important context. The fact of the matter is, we're right, and the Spirit's on our side. And that's something to remember. So the way we resist is remembering context, remembering the big picture of what's going on, remembering that resistance and power is rooted also in the tiny, meaning the things we do around our home, the things we do around our community are beautiful and echo, and that with what we've seen in Bad River, and I'm praying that Menominee experiences the same beautiful thing, that the unity of tribes coming together, the unity of people coming together, it carries power. The fact of the matter for our story in Bad River was that ceremonies and using those gifts we were given, like our plugins and the wavelings, the drums and the pipes, and remembering who we are, that those things help carry us. That food and medicine and remembering how that stuff works is all part of our resistance. And that laughter, that art, that sharing, and all of that is part of our resistance. When we look at the types of things that work and that we got to continue, educating our kids and helping them remember our ways is very important. I think about the winter camps that the Ojibwe tribes have been doing recently, and it's just a beautiful thing to see. 50, 60 kids learning their ways, learning how to fish and gather and hunt and old stories so they can remember over in Mole Lake. And at that same weekend up in Bad River, 50, 60 kids doing the same thing up there. Getting them out in the woods, showing them that there's a real tangible undercurrent and foundation to Montezuma and that beautiful life. Those types of things are how we've been winning and how we'll continue to win. And so the mining district that Governor Walker used to talk about is starting to manifest. They got the White Pine Mine, Urbana. They're cruising for minerals in Porcupine Mountains. The Menominee are dealing with the Back 40 mine. We have, we see some of the mining dreams start to light up, and the time is now to come together to try and protect some of that stuff. It ain't easy being an Indian, right? Because then we talk about the pipelines and the fact that people don't recognize the center of Wisconsin is being liquidated for cash in the form of the tiniest little rocks, frac sand. And frac sand's being trucked out to split aquifers and shale. And it's coming back in the form of oil through pipelines. Oil pipelines that are leaking and destroying places. Fracking is a form of insanity on Mother Earth that is hard to comprehend. When you're literally poisoning aquifers, when you think of Oklahoma and the fact that they're up to 270 earthquakes a year around the fracking epicenter, it's unbelievable. And so the pipeline resistance that we have going is connected to the resource extraction. It's connected to mining. It's something that we're trying to address and isn't going to go away, at least in the next 4 years. The other threat that's manifesting now that we got to recognize is the expansion of CAFOs. And I think if you haven't heard what a CAFO is, it's a concentrated animal feeding operation. And up in our neck of the woods, Chequamegon Bay as an example, they have a CAFO slated in the Lake Superior Drainage Basin, about 7 miles off of Chequamegon Bay, where the fossils are, that would house 26,000 pigs. 26,000 pigs that would produce around 9 million gallons of sewage, untreated sewage a year. And CAFOs don't have to have sewage treatment plants like small communities. So counties like Keweenaw County, Dora County, some of those places around Green Bay, folks are dealing with tainted groundwater wells, tainted drinking water, tainted ecosystems like in the creeks and the rivers in terms of nutrient loading. Between CAFOs, pipelines, fracking, and mining, we have a heck of a challenge, and that's part of the stuff that we're here to talk about and address. So throwing our minds into the fact that our ceremonies and our unity and all of that have helped us, there's also this notion of getting our lawyers going and recognizing that there are regulatory processes and laws that we have to work. And I want to just say really quickly that when we asked for help, we went back to some of our oldest ceremonies, and some of the things that they said were beautiful. How do we stop the mine? One of the things they said, everything you need is all around you. I remember a tribal leader asking the spirit, what can we as tribal leaders do to stop the mine? We as individuals. He came back and he said, stop using alcohol and drugs today. It steals your voice and you can't hear the spirit. It was a beautiful thing. They also went and asked those questions in our oldest ceremonies when we were laying down on the tracks in Bad River to stop sulfuric acid shipments. And one of the things that came out of those early environmental defense efforts was you need to use the feather and the pen. And that is one of the things that I wanted to just convey today. The feather and the pen. And having spent 6 years battling a mine in our home, I've come to see this as a spiritual battle. You know, where people just don't feel good and they think that destroying their homes from mine is somehow going to make them feel better. And there's more to that notion of spiritual battle, but I'll say this, that remembering our ceremonies and using our lawyers and combining those in that effort is one of those earliest instructions we got in Bad River, using the feather and the pen. So, I think, I better see how long I've been talking here. I think that, the last thing that I want to just mention is that a friend of mine who camped in the Pinocchis at the LCO Harvest Camp while we were resisting the Gogebic mine said that he who has the best story will win. And of course, in honor of International Women's Day, I'll say he or she who has the best story will win. You know, the story and remembering the narrative that's going on right now is very important. These resource extraction efforts come in preaching a mentality of scarcity. Mr. Desaw, you've been living in Menominee, from time immemorial, but you didn't realize this. You guys aren't happy. What you need is this mine, and then you guys are going to be all squared away because you've been suffering without it. It's a mentality of scarcity. You guys are all deprived right now. You're not given the American dream like other places. You need to do this. And what they point at is a monstrous, destructive hole in the ground where they take all of the bounty of the land in the form of water and aquifers and clean air and replace it with their bags of money and then split. You know, that's the resource curse. Those communities that are the richest in natural resources experience resource extraction, and then they're left as the poorest people around. Poorest monetarily because they have this huge pollution kind of base and nobody wants to be around it. And then poor because that their environment has been degraded and they're experiencing poison. It's the resource curse that Dr. Algetics talks about. But that mentality of scarcity is their story, is the corporation's narrative that they're working these communities with. Now, I've seen things like Governor Scott Walker refuse to really help out Iron County. It's almost like they ratchet up that desperation that they're trying to invoke in people. No broadband, no grants, no tourism help. Meanwhile, they're building massive trails around the Manitowoc area, the Monaco area, to facilitate tourism and businesses. But that's their narrative. And the simple response is to remember the beautiful gift that Mother Earth is, You know, I had to realize that if I'm going to think about Mother Earth being possibly half dead, and I thought like that for a long time, dealing with this positivity and negativity that comes with fight and mind, it hit me one day, I better acknowledge that the Creator and Mother Earth are so unbelievable that what is still around us is enough to bring it back, to bring her back into balance, and to bring our people through into perpetuity. The beauty of the systems that are still around us is there. The integrity of the processes, at least around us, is still there. I wouldn't say the same thing for like the Alberta tar sands. I wouldn't say the same thing there. That's a rehab that's going to take billions of years. But for us, where we're resisting, we're in the freshwater stronghold of Turtle Island, the freshwater stronghold of the United States. And so our resistance and our defense as patriots, I'll say this, as patriots of America, is rooted in national security. National security and life and death. The life of our country is rooted in this place that we protect because the systems and the things that are here are that powerful. Lake Superior, as the grandma of the Great Lakes, is important on a planetary scale, on a tiny little scale of a country like the United States. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Lake Erie, they're saying with the cuts to the EPA that we'll lose Lake Erie because of the algae blooms. You guys probably know this, but Lake Erie has a 2.5-year recharge. It means Lake Erie changes its bathwater every 2.5 years. If they can't rehab Lake Erie with the advantage of having Lake Erie change its bathwater every 2.5 years, we better really dig in and protect Lake Superior, because Lake Superior is on a 200-year recharge. It takes Lake Superior 200 years to recharge herself. When algae, and this ain't going to happen, if algae ever found her way to Lake Superior because of cave flows and mining and all that stuff, you don't get a do-over. You don't get a do-over with the grandma there. And so that is the power of this place. And it's really the epitome, a beautiful example of where air, land, water, and fire all comes together. And it's worth fighting for. It's life for our children. So with that seventh generation perspective, remembering that there's power in tiny acts of goodness, like growing your own food, and standing up and testifying and resisting corporate resource extraction, we'll win. We'll win, and we can still carve out a little bit of Mino Belantaziwan, good life, this good life for ourselves. And so, context, resistance, story, easy, right? And I think with that, I'll end my keynote address and just say thank you for your time and attention. We wish.